Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. The first thing I want to say is thank you for everyone who subscribed. Today I actually hit 100 subscribers. That's a big milestone for me. And the second thing is, hey, if you haven't heard about Roblox, or at least if you haven't dived into it like I haven't yet, I don't know why not, because I just found out there's some developers making some serious cash making games on Roblox. So I went ahead, I looked at the tutorial they had, and it's a little out of date, so some things have slightly changed. And what I figured is I'm gonna make a video for you. You can go ahead, watch my video, get an idea of how the tutorial they had works, and just have a visual representation so that way you don't have to do as much reading. And then in my tutorial, you're gonna see how to drag and drop items around on your platform to make your game, and how items can be added to disappear or reappear, so when the user jumps on, they'll disappear and they'll fall. There's also to account for how a player could die in your game and reset their score, as well as at the end of the video, you'll see a leaderboard component that is built into the Roblox Studio as well. And so hopefully this video makes a lot of sense to you. You'll have a better understanding of how to jump into development. Hey, and if you start loving this topic, I'll make more videos on Roblox. And hey, maybe we'll make a lot of money together making these games on Roblox. So let's go ahead, take a look at Roblox Studio now, and hopefully this video is very helpful for you. All right, to get started, go ahead and go to roblox.com/create. And on this website, if you click Start Creating, it's going to actually prompt you to download the Roblox Developer Studio. And also, I just want to point out here, this is pretty crazy. This is the part that kind of pulled me in, is that they're actually saying their top developers are earning over $2 million a year because of in-experience purchases. And I've also heard that you can even make money just from people playing your game, so you don't even have to do in-app purchases as well. So after you go ahead and download it, and you're gonna wanna also sign up for an account, you'll open up the Roblox Studio. Inside of the Dev Studio, you're going to do this new button, and then you can pick base plate or classic base plate. So basically, if I go through what they had in their tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead, go through their steps to get you started, similarly to how I'm just now starting to learn this, and we'll kind of learn together. And then, I'll try to make more advanced tutorials in the future. But let's just go ahead, step through their steps. Some of their tutorial is out of date, so that's why I've also decided to make this video. So let's go ahead and get started. So click base plate. And now once you get into this screen, they want you to expand the workspace, and they actually are saying that you should delete the base plate, which I guess we'll do that because for this, they want to create what is called an obby, or an obstacle course. That's their example they give you. So if you delete this base plate, you'll see that that has gone away. So if I were to run this game now and you jump, you are going to just fall forever until eventually you hit a point where it has you kind of die and then you respawn. The other thing to note is that there's this spawn location. So when you join the game, this is where the character will spawn. Additionally, note that if you have ever seen Unity, this dev platform is very similar to Unity. So if you have experience with that, this will probably be even easier for you to jump right into. Additionally, the scripting language used in the Roblox Studio is Lua. So if you want to ever go study up Lua to help you with that, then I would suggest taking a look at some of that, or if you really want me to kind of dive into it for you, I can do that as well. All right, so to get started with this obstacle course, and again, in the tutorial, basically they're just saying you should add a part. So you can actually add a part by just clicking this button up here, and then it lets you select whether you want to add a block, spear, wedge, or cylinder. Let's go ahead and add a block. And from this point, you can actually click and drag and move it around. So we'll go ahead and just put this block over here. And now you can scale it. So if you scale it, you can make it a little larger. The length and width of everything. You could even make it a little taller. So we're just going to do this to make it easy for the user to jump to the first block. And now that I have actually deselected the select, if you want to actually move it, just go ahead and click that move button. So make it to where it's not too far for the user to jump to. And now we're finished with our first part. And as I was saying, there's other shapes in here. So in the example, they kind of have you just go ahead, add some shapes for the user to jump to. So that way you can kind of just see what is available to you. So let's go ahead and add a cylinder. We also want to scale it so that way it's not too hard for the user to jump onto. So make it a little longer. And you can zoom in with the mouse wheel. If you hold this right click and you move your mouse around, that'll kind of pan around. And you can use ASWD to move around with the camera. So we'll go ahead and make sure that this actually makes sense. It's actually kind of lined up with our second panel you're hopping to. And now let's go ahead and add a couple more parts. So we'll add a spear that they can jump onto, and then we'll just go ahead and move that. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Should be reasonable for them to jump to, and then we'll also add a wedge. And you can also rotate this wedge so that way it's actually kind of facing where they're going next. Again, with this rotation tool. Also, a lot of these properties are also over here in this properties section. So you can control a lot of that, whether you're more interested in just looking at the numbers of it, or you're interested in just using the UX, that's up to you, but it will probably be a little bit easier for you to start to become familiar with the properties, especially when you go to start writing some code. Also, one thing I almost forgot, don't forget to actually anchor these items or they'll just fall because gravity applies to these items. So the game engine will just let them drop until they hit something. So go ahead and anchor these so that way when you start your game, they don't just fall out of the sky. Also, aside from just clicking anchor down here, you can also click it up here, by the way. I'll zoom out, make sure to anchor this last item. Okay, and then I'll go back to move, and I will scale it to make it a little easier for them to get onto. Okay, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add just a couple more of these parts. Meant to grab this one. Make sure that looks good. And we'll actually just move it a little higher so that way they have to kind of actually jump up a little bit. And then let's just go ahead and add one more block. We'll make that a little higher, scale that one as well. You can also copy and paste, so if I wanted to, I could reuse the existing blocks that I had created. Okay, so now that I have some blocks, now we'll go ahead and start working on the scripts. One last thing I almost forgot too is you can actually change the material. So this used to just change the appearance, but now it also will apply properties to this. So for the first tutorial we're doing here, it's not as important. And again, you can also change the color of these items too, so we can make this blue if we wanted to. Again, don't forget to anchor your items. I almost did again. Okay, and so now again, we have enough blocks for the user to kind of jump onto just to showcase a very basic obstacle course. Also in the tutorial, they'll talk about using the items in this toolbox here because they're shared models that you can utilize to add to your game. So obviously you have the spawn point, but also in the example they like to say, oh, like, hey, you could use this tree. And so let's go ahead and just add this tree, I guess, at the end of our obstacle course. Right now it's humongous, so let's go ahead and scale it down a little bit. Again, don't forget to anchor it. If you put it on top of the platform, it'd probably just land on the platform and not fall any further, but might as well just anchor it so that way we don't end up losing it in case it were to fall unexpectedly after our game started. So looks like that's pretty good. Let's put that at the end here. Okay, now we have a tree model at the end of our little obstacle course here. All right, so now again we have enough of the pieces. Let's go ahead and click play. This will run your game. Now again, you can pan around with your character using that right click, and now you can ASWD to move your character around. Spacebar will jump. So let's go ahead and see if we can make it to the end of our very basic obstacle course. Now it looks like I may have actually made that a little too far apart. So this is why you want to play test it. And as you can see, when you fall, as I said earlier, you fall basically until you respawn. So let's go ahead and make that a little easier, just that way it's not as frustrating for the user. So we'll stop. We'll go ahead, grab that item, click move, pull it a little bit closer. All right, and then let's try it again. All right, so now again, run, jump. There you go. Now you're on this platform. Now you got to make it to this. Oh. I may have made this too difficult. All right, so we'll stop it again. We'll go ahead, maybe make this sphere a little bigger. See if that makes it a little easier. And then move it over, down a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And then move it down a little bit again. Maybe over that direction. Oh, too far. Maybe up a tiny bit. Okay. Maybe this will be easy. Maybe I'm just not very good at my own obstacle course, but let's see. And you know what? Let's also make this wedge a little bigger, just so that way I can actually get to the end of my own little sample obstacle course here. Okay. So now let's go ahead and click play again. Alright, to the ball. Hey, look at this. Now we're getting there. Alright. Oh, and I made that too far away. So, real quick, let's move that closer. Move our tree over. Okay. Maybe move it down a tiny bit just in case. And there we go. Let's try this one last time. Okay. Alright, hey, I made it to the end. Okay, so now, as you can see, this is the sample obstacle course. Let's go ahead and add some of the other pieces that are mentioned in the tutorial, so that way you can see just how you can use some Lua script to add some additional elements to your obstacle course. And then after that, I'll show you how you can publish your game, and that will wrap it up for this video to show you just how to get started with this Roblox Studio and Lua script. Alright, in the next part of the tutorial, they start talking about how you can make these items disappear and then reappear, so that way the user has to kind of wait for them to reappear to jump onto them. So let's go ahead and let's do that with, let's say, maybe this wedge. So this wedge item, we've selected it. You're going to go ahead and click this plus button, and now you can add a script to it. So script. And then inside the script is where we're going to add the function that will make this item disappear. So in here, you can see they actually have just a simple print statement to say hello world, which will show up in the console. We don't really want that, so we'll go ahead, remove that. And now we're going to want to create a local variable to the script that can reference the actual wedge part item. So the way you do this is you'll say local, because again, you don't want to have a global variable. There's no need for that. This script is specific to the wedge. We'll just call it wedge. And then you can say script.parent. And what this does is it gives you access to the parent of the script, which happens to be the wedge. So now you have access to that wedge object. And now to make it appear and disappear, let's go ahead and start writing a function for that. So in Lua, for a function, you can do it like this. So we're declaring a local function. We'll call it disappear, just like they do in the tutorial. Optionally, you can add parameters in between these parentheses, but for this particular function, we don't need that. And then if you want to add a comment, you could just, with 2 dashes, describe what you're adding in here. This will help it for readability. If you're not as familiar with code and comments are confusing you and functions are confusing you, let me know. I do have another tutorial in Java, not Lua, where I start kind of introducing users to code, but hopefully you at least have a little bit of understanding for this video. And again, if you have questions, let me know. So then, yeah, I'll just say like, this is a function to make the part disappear. All right. And then the wedge item, you will have to change some properties for it to disappear and to allow the user to actually fall through it. So in order for them to fall through it, we need to say the wedge, which is the part. Now you're accessing the class properties of that part. So it has different functions here you can see. So the Roblox Studio is suggesting to you which functions you might want to use or properties. So we're going to actually change the can collide property. We're going to set it to false. So this allows the user to fall through the wedge. And then additionally, we're also going to set the transparency to 1. So this will make it disappear from the screen because it will become completely transparent. Again, we're going to also want to add something to make our wedge reappear. So we'll say appear, and then also, one thing I wanted to know is when you push enter, the nice thing about Roblox Studio is it actually is also adding the end keyword here. And this is how you basically wrap your function. So when you have functions in Lua, again, you have to say, local, you have to declare the function and then wrap it with n. In Java, you're going to use curly braces. So each language has its differences, but this is part of the Lua syntax. So now you also want to say wedge dot can collide, and then obviously for disappear we set it to false, so we're going to want to set it back to true so that way the user can actually step on it. And then we're going to set the transparency equal to 0 so that way it reappears. And then lastly in the tutorial they talk about just adding a loop, and this loop is, we're just going to go ahead and set it to true. And if you're not familiar with loops, again, I suggest taking a look at maybe my other tutorial, again in Java, where I actually do end up going through loops. Obviously not the exact same syntax as Lua, but it will help you kind of get an understanding. And then there is a wait function, so we will just add it as 3, so I believe it's in seconds, so for 3 seconds it will wait, and you want to add a wait function because if you don't add wait, it actually says that it will make your game unstable if you're kind of looping through and just going. That's because it's going to be running so quickly, so you do want to add some time for it to wait before it goes disappear and then back to reappear. So we'll say 3 seconds. Then we'll call our disappear function. Then we'll wait another 3 seconds. And then we'll call our appear function. All right, now real quick, let's go ahead and play test the game. All right, so now you can see over here, our wedge is disappearing and reappearing. So we'll play that out in just a little bit, and you'll see how that if I actually stood on it and while it disappeared, that I would fall. But let's go ahead and also add the next element in the tutorial before I do that. So I'll go ahead and click stop. And the next element in the tutorial that they suggest adding is an example of like a lava floor. So let's go ahead and add another part in here. So I'll click part, block, and then this block, I will move it. I'll put it underneath of everything. I'll scale it so that way it's large enough for the user to fall on. And don't forget to anchor it so that way it doesn't fall. You can actually see the shadow that the game engine is displaying for the item, so it kind of gives you an idea. But sometimes it's easier to look at it from up above. Okay, and right now the item is blue. That doesn't really make much sense here. So I'm going to actually change that in a second, but I'm just going to move it one more time so that way it's below our ball. Okay, there we go. So now, in order for it to look a little bit more like lava, as in their example, they kind of just let you pick something. So I actually found that what kind of looks like lava would be the granite material along with like a red color. So pick, sure, let's go with really red. And then the material, like I said, I picked granite. And yeah, that actually looks close to lava. Let's just go with that. And now, in order for it to actually cause the player to restart when they land on it, you're going to, again, want to add another script. So let's go ahead and add a script under our lava floor part. And now, There's another thing they actually mentioned in the tutorial that I almost forgot. You can rename these parts, so just so that way if you're ever looking at your workspace, you have a little better of an idea of what everything is. Let's just call it lava floor, so that way you don't have part. And then you can also rename the script to be a little bit more descriptive. So we're going to call this, I believe, what they call a skill player. So we'll do that as well. All right, and now again, remove that starter code, and let's write the script so that way the player restarts. So again, we're going to want to get that actual part that we're accessing, which is our lava floor. So we'll say again, script.parent. And now we have access to our lava floor part. Now we also want to write another function. So this is the function that they suggest, is adding one called kill player. And now this one, you actually are going to want to pass a value. So they are basically saying that the value that we pass in is the part that is being touched. So when the lava floor is touched with the part of the player, that is what you're going to be referencing here. So we're going to create another variable, and then you're going to store the part that was touched, which we will say that would be is the part touching. So that is, again, the part that touches the floor. You will say what is the parent of that part. And now the reason why you're getting the parent is you're going to also be utilizing another function to get what they call the humanoid. The humanoid is the player. So we're going to store another value, which is humanoid. And then you will say that part touched. You will find the first child. This is a built-in function in the Roblox dev kit, essentially. There's documentation on all the different functions you can use. If you've been using other languages to code, just know that, whenever you're using libraries of code, there's functions that other developers have written. So that's essentially what you're utilizing here, is the functions they have written. And then you're going to want to say that the first child you want to find is humanoid. So again, you're looking to get access to the humanoid class of the part that is touching the lava floor. So now, if humanoid, which just means that if it exists, basically in Lua it will be nil or it could be false. If it's anything other than a value, then it would not make it in here. So again, you're adding this if statement to make sure that you actually were able to successfully pull that first child, which is the humanoid, or again, the player. And now in order for you to restart the player, you have to access the health property and set their health equal to 0. Now, in order for this value to get passed to this kill player function, you want to also utilize a way to connect a event, which they call touched. So again, in the dev kit that they have provided, there is a touched property. This event will be triggered when something touches that part, and then you want to connect a function to that. So we are connecting, and as you can see, it actually says it right here, just to showcase how this developer studio will kind of suggest things to you. So it registers a function to call each time an event is triggered. As I was saying, the event that's being triggered is that the user is touching the lava floor. So now, lastly, you want to then put the function you want to connect to it. So we'll say we want to put the kill player function. And now that is linked to where they will now die if they actually touch that lava floor. So let's go ahead and click play. And now if I were to, let's go ahead, just go over to our disappearing floor real quick, showcase this. So with this wedge here, I will jump on it in a second, and now I'm gonna wait for it to disappear so I can show that you fall. And when I touch the lava floor, I should have died. So something is not quite right. Let's go ahead and take another look at this. Actually, I just noticed what happened. So while I was using the suggestive text, because I was just pushing enter and letting Roblox Studio try to do things for me, I noticed that actually it added these parentheses. This is actually not the syntax that you want to do to link the function. I didn't even realize it while I was typing this earlier. You want to remove those parentheses, put just the function name, not the parentheses, and now it will actually work. So let's go ahead and click play one more time. And now I don't need to jump over to the wedge. I already showcased how you fall through it. You'll see that the player dies once they touch the lava floor, and now they restart back to the beginning. So let's finish up the last part that they have in their tutorial, where they showcase how you can add a platform that will fade as the user touches it and then reappear as soon as they're no longer touching it. So let's go ahead and click stop. Okay, and then so to add this fading property, let's go ahead and click this part. Let's rename this part just so that way we know which one we're dealing with here. So we'll call it fading part, sure. And now we're going to again add another script. We'll rename this one again just to help ourselves. So we'll call it just fade. We'll remove this starter code. And now again, we're going to get the fading part. So again, we want to access the parent of the script. Now we'll add another value, which this one will be called isTouch. This is that way we can restart the script, so that way essentially the part won't think that it's still touched after the user is no longer on top of it. We have to have a way for it to reappear. So we're going to set this Boolean value of isTouch to false. Now we're going to add another function. We'll call this one fade. And now you're going to add an if statement where you're going to say if not isTouch. This is the way that they write it. There's actually several ways apparently to do this. In Lua, basically, you're just saying that if it's not true, that you're going to start fading the platform. So now what we're going to do is we're going to then say then isTouch will now become true because at this point they have touched the platform. And now you're going to do another simple loop. So we're going to add a for loop where we're going to basically count to 10. This is that way it's not an immediate fade, it is a slow fade. And then the fading part, we're going to then start slowly making its transparency fade out. So the example is that they end up just using this count value because it's going to be increasing all the way to 10. So your transparency, once it ends up hitting 10, would be the full 1 amount. Otherwise, if it's less than 1, it's slowly growing to 1. It's going to be slowly fading out. And oh, almost forgot, you want to add a wait, so that way it actually won't happen almost immediately because it's just going to tick right through otherwise. So it's waiting that 1/10 of a second. And now you're also going to make the fading part so that way the user would fall through it, and you'll say can't collide is false. And then to make it reappear, let's go ahead and wait 3 seconds. Now we'll go ahead and set that can collide property back to true. This will make it reappear. And then we will also reset that transparency back to 0. And we will also reset our isTouch back to false. So that way, again, if the user is not currently touching it, we want to reset that. And then similarly to how we used our lava floor, we're going to then say fading part dot touched and connect. And this time, don't make the same mistake. Just go ahead, just do fade. Don't let the suggestive piece add those parentheses. And now again, if we click play, we'll go ahead, run over to that part. All right. Now that we're touching it, you see it starting to fade. I better jump off it, otherwise I would have fallen through. And now you see it reappeared. So again, that's how you add a fading part. You have the part that appears and reappears. So you can gradually do the transparency, or you can immediately set it to 0. So we're going to go ahead and click stop. And now let's cover the last element of the tutorial. I almost forgot there's one more. And this is how you can access the built-in leaderboard properties that they have added for you to utilize. So we're going to go ahead and go over that now. All right, so what their suggestion is for this particular script, because it's more of a script for your entire game, not really a script that is for a part, they suggest that you set up the game state scripts in the server script service. So what happens is when you add them here, it will run every time your game starts. And so you're going to add a script, they call it setup points. So let's just go ahead and also follow their pattern. We'll rename it, we'll call it setup points. And again, you have different services because of the Roblox dev kit that you can utilize. And so there is a service that you will need to use to access information about the players and if the player has been added when they join the game. And then you're going to want to use the get service function to get access to this function, as well as game, which has a different properties about your game. And then also there is a folder that you need to create, and this is one where you need to call it leader stats because that's what the game engine is looking for. And what this folder property is essentially the folder is something that, again, the Roblox Studio has provided to you to kind of make things easy for you to organize. And again, it's looking specifically for this folder, so that's why you're going to name it leader stats. All right, so let's go ahead and utilize that get service to get the players service. This is so that way we can access all of the players in the game, so that way we know when they have died. So we'll say local players equals game. So again, this is a class that you can utilize. You will have the instance of this class in your game, and then to get the player service from the game, you're going to say get service. And again, this service is called players. And you can see it's actually going ahead and trying to suggest that to you. So now we're going to create another function. And this function will just be able to tell if a character has been added to the game. So somebody's essentially joined your game. It automatically will end up pulling in the character and the player. You're going to need to know the character model so you know if they've died, and the player model will be used for something else here in a bit. So now we have this function. So right here, we're going to add a property for each player. We don't want that one, we want just player. And the property we're going to add, or the attribute, is that they're alive or they're not, basically. So we're going to say that when they join the game, they are alive. So we're going to say true. And now you also want to get that humanoid class again. So the instance of humanoid, so that will come from the character class. So the instance of character, you're going to want to, again, wait for child, and then get the humanoid child. And now you're going to also connect a function to the died property. So the connect function we are going to connect, this is how we're going to actually go ahead and know if they've died so we can reset their points. So to add a function within here, you're just going to do it like this. And then inside the function, we will say that their points equal the player dot leader stats dot points. And you will also set the points value equal to 0 because they've died, so you want to reset their points. And then we're going to also set that attribute of is alive to false because they have died from touching the lava. Or they fell off, but they can't really do that now because we padded the lava floor to catch them. Okay, so that's it for that. Now we've connected the ability to reset the points to 0 if the player has died. Now we also want to add a function for when the player is added to our game. We'll pass in the player object. And then we want to also now create that folder of leader stats. So again, this is something that Roblox knows about, and so you're going to use this instance method to create a new folder. So just like that, you are adding a folder to your game, and then you will have leader stats. There's properties of this folder, so we're going to name the folder itself leader stats. We're also going to set the parent of leader stats. The parent will be the player that has joined. So you want to set this folder underneath of the player. So again, each player will have their own leader stats folder. Now you are also wanting to set the points that you can add for this player. So we're creating a integer value that will be in this folder because we want to store a number, that number being the points. Then we're also going to set the name of this value in our folder. We'll call it points. And I'm pretty sure, using the tutorial, this is the exact names that they're using it. If you want to play around with it, you can, but I'm pretty sure that their internal code is actually looking for these specific names, so I would suggest not really straying away. I know that it definitely said it was looking for leader stats. I imagine it's also looking for points as well. So we'll set the parent of points equal to leader stats. And we also want to set the points value equal to 0. Last, we want to set the player attribute of is alive to false because they've joined our game, but they're not actually added into the game yet. Once their character's added, they are alive, which is why we've done it up in the onCharacter function. But until their actual player model which is their character, has been added, they're not technically alive yet. And here is where we're going to actually have a way to call the onCharacter added, so that way, again, their character is added, and at that point, we're going to say that they are alive. So character added, and then connect. We're going to connect our function that we just had earlier, and now we want to pass the character, which is, again, something that is automatically part of the character added function of the player class. So now you're adding your character parameter, and lastly, you're going to call the function that we added. We're going to pass that character object, and we're also going to need to pass our player instance as well. So you've now passed player to the function that we called. You're also passing character, so that way, again, we can set all the properties we set up there. And now one more thing we need to do is we have that players instance that we grabbed from the service. So now we have the instance of that service players. In order to tie everything together, we need to use the players player added function and connect our on player added function. Again, let's remove these parentheses, we don't want those. And now we've connected the built-in service method to our own custom method here of on player added, and this will tie it all together. And the last thing we want to do is, while the game is running, we want to loop through the list of players and start incrementing their points. So in order to do that, we'll go ahead and create a while loop, and we'll wait for 1 second. Now we're going to create another value of this player list, and the players service can give us all the players in the game with get players. And now here we will do a for loop. And in Lua, if you actually do this pound sign or hashtag, if that's what you want to call it now because of Twitter, how it's basically turned pound into hashtag, you will say player list. So now we're going to essentially loop from the beginning to the end of our player list. And while you're looping through there, you will have another local variable, which is your player. So you're going to get each individual player in your array that contains all of your players, which you got from the player service. And this is where we're going to actually utilize that attribute that we've been setting so we know if the user is actually alive or not. So is alive. I almost had a mistake there when it's case sensitive. I made this mistake actually up here too. Let's make sure we're consistent. Is alive. This is important. Okay. So now a few more pieces to set up and then we're just about done. So now we want points, local variable. So from the player instance, now we also want to go that leader stats property and the points. So we're grabbing the points that each player has, and then what we're doing is we're taking the value of the points of each player and we are incrementing it by 1. Okay, so now that wraps it up. We now have everything we need in order for a leaderboard to display and for the player to increment points as long as they're alive. So let's go ahead and click play. And now you'll see that the points are increasing, 4 points, 5 points. This is just a very simple way to accumulate points. Obviously in your game, you might have something that's a little more complex. Maybe your obstacle course gives points based on how high they got, maybe how quick they got there, whatever it may be. And then as more players join, they'll all have points. But for the simple example, let's just go with that. And then I'll show you real quick how that if I were to die, that my points get reset. And there you go, back to 0. So this is a very simple walkthrough of Roblox. I wanted to show you how to get started. I read the documentation because I have to learn this too. It's new to me. And I thought this was very fascinating because there's a lot of potential that this Roblox studio really has. I mean, with their user base, you could really make some interesting games, and it's kind of similar to other things you could think about how like people sell on Amazon. And basically the appeal to that is that you have this huge user base that already comes there expecting to buy something. Well, in this case, you have a huge user base that is expecting to come play video games, and they might spend money on your video game, or you get money just because of the incentive system where if people play your game, that Roblox will end up paying you. So yeah, this gets you started. If there's any particular topics that you want to hear about, you want me to research for you in Roblox, I can try to do that as well. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And I hope that this is something that we'll both learn together, and hey, maybe you'll make some money. Maybe you'll be one of those developers that makes thousands and thousands of dollars on something that maybe you'll find passion in. So thank you for taking the time to watch my video, and I'll see you next time.